Good morning, everyone. Let's see. Oh, it does look like it's coming through. Um, if you guys don't mind, and I hate doing this, but I've changed my setup. Could you guys just hit the raise hand button if you can hear me? I just want to make sure my audio is coming through all right. Oh, hello? Check, check, check. Okay. Oh, perfect. There we go. I see you guys' hands up. Thank you. Just wanted to make sure we're doing it a different way. I've got a new computer, different screen, same headset. All right. So this morning we're going to be doing a training on the Realist tax system. So what we're going to be doing is primarily just running through the absolute basics of the system, but I also wanted to give you guys some insight into some of the extra options that you can do once you're in there. Before we get started with any of the actual webinar course content, I just wanted to run through some basics with the webinar itself. So first and foremost, everybody's going to be starting on mute by default. We do not require everybody's cameras to be on. So if you're in your pajamas, more power to you. We don't mind. We do have a Q&A button to ask questions. If you guys have any trouble spotting it, it's going to be down at the bottom of your screen. There's also a chat option. This is going to be best used for any comments, examples, stories you guys want to share, whatever the case may be. This session will be recorded. I'm going to be sending a link to you guys after class is over. Let us know if you guys end up having any audio or video issues at all. Since all of our classes are now CE credit, I kind of want to reinforce this. If you guys are getting disconnected or experiencing a lot of lag or video issues, audio issues, anything like that, we just want to make sure that you guys let us know immediately. You might not be the only one that's having those problems. And also we want to make sure that everybody that's in here gets their CE credit. Now the CE credit itself is actually going to be delivered to OREC pretty quickly. We usually have a very fast turnaround on getting it to them. Oftentimes the only delays that we're noticing are just it actually being applied to your account. So if you guys have any questions about that, you can always get in contact with us. Our education director is Jessica Birch. So if you guys have any questions, problems, anything like that with the CE credit side of things, just get in contact with us and ask for Jessica Birch. I'm the training director, so I'm usually the one that's actually doing the, you know, I'm the guy out front. She's the one doing all the actual tough work in the background. So anyway, as far as those buttons go, again, down at the very bottom of your screen, you guys should notice the chat, raise hand, and Q&A. Now, chat and Q&A we've already covered. Can chat for any commentary, Q&A for any questions. But I also wanted to mention the raise hand option is actually going to be something that you can use if you guys have a question you'd like to ask with your voice. So if I see your hand up outside of like, these little impromptu polls like I just did, I'm going to assume that that means that you guys are actually wanting to ask a question. I also wanted to mention if you are on a mobile device, again, no problem if you guys are. If you guys are on an iPad, an iPhone, Android device of some kind, doesn't matter. You guys should still be able to get credit. I did want to point out, though, that the buttons are going to be just a little bit different. There's going to be a different interface down at the very bottom. Again, raise hand, chat, Q&A, just like we were just talking about. It might just be a little bit more important to mention that raise hand option. I don't know about you guys, but typing out on that tiny screen isn't always the most ideal option, but sure is nice to have autocorrect. Anyway, if you do end up needing to reach out to us, if you guys get disconnected too many times, or if you're having audio or video issues, or just can't even let me know that you're having audio or video issues, reach out to us by the phone number down here at the very bottom of the screen. 918-663-7500. We're open Monday through Friday, 8 to 5:30. We have been short-staffed, I think, a little bit here and there recently, just because we've gotten a couple new hires. We're trying to get them trained up. But we have one of the new hires that's currently shadowing, and we have full staff on the rest of the side. So you guys can always reach out to us, and we'll have some new voices coming in soon. Anyway, let's go ahead. That's it. Yeah, perfect. On the dot. We'll go ahead and get started. So to kick us off, I wanted to mention how to actually get into Realist. Now, there's a couple different ways for you to do so. When you first get signed into the MLS portal, obviously there's going to be a nice big button here for Realist. That's usually the one that I recommend to people just because, it's nice and easy. But if you guys happen to be signed into Matrix already, Matrix does have a nice big button right up here at the top that allows you to switch over into Realist Tax. And then there's also, zooming this in, sorry, the new browser hasn't been zoomed in yet. There's also a public record search that you can find in Matrix. That's effectively a tax record search, just like what we're going to be covering in Realist, but found within Matrix. Now, it's not going to have quite as much in the way of options as we are going to be seeing when we get over into Realist. Some of the things that we'll be covering at the very, very end of class, like the last 10 or 15 minutes or so, is going to be stuff that you can't do in Matrix at all. So we're going to talk about some of those utilities. Let me get this set up into the right spot. There we go. All right. So what Realist is actually the county. Oh, and actually, I am so sorry. One more step before we actually get started with the course content. This is just going to be an impromptu, or not an impromptu poll, but a poll. I do need everybody to respond to this in order to validate your participation to OREC. So make sure that you guys find that survey. If you guys are not seeing the survey, please let me know. But then we can go ahead and move on. Perfect. All right. There we go. And I'm actually asked, I'm glad I added this question. Where are you guys most frequently getting tax record information from? I probably should switch this over to a multiple choice and rephrase that, but it looks like 2/3 of you guys are using Realist and a third of you guys are already using Matrix to get the tax record information. So that's actually good. It also seems to have some overlap with our have you used Realist before? So if anything, I'm glad to give you guys an intro to this system. I do think it's actually a pretty valuable one. So we'll go ahead and get started. So when you guys first get into Realist, just to give you guys effectively a synopsis of how this works, Realist actually is a system that takes the digital data that the county assessor's offices are putting out and puts it into a format that's going to allow you guys to run searches for it, find information based on the map, details about all of the properties, et cetera, et cetera. Now, this is going to be available for all 77 counties in Oklahoma. And then we've also added the 7 neighboring counties over across the border into Arkansas. So you guys should see all of these on the border here. Notably, we don't have anything over here from any of our other neighboring states. But in order to actually see the data from a particular county, we're actually going to have to use the little county selection item up at the top here. So before we start talking about how to use the searches or what the map is for, or any of the results page, let's go up to the top left and double check our county. Now, currently, I only have one county that's been selected. And what this means is that in my situation, I'm only going to be seeing results from Tulsa County. This is a great way to make sure that I'm not seeing something that I searched just now that's supposed to be in Tulsa proper. And meanwhile, it's pulling up something out in the Panhandle or something like that, just because it happens to have the same address. Nope, don't have to worry about that. We choose our county, and then we can just move on. So I'm going to actually head over here to change county, and this is where we get to choose which counties we're going to apply. Notably, Realist does apply some limitations to almost anything that you guys have in this system. They want to make sure that you guys are not overburdening yourself with too many counties and providing yourself with too many results might be harder for you guys to focus that down into the exact result that you want. But they also recognize that it's pretty unlikely that you're going to end up working in more than 12 counties at any given moment. But they do allow us to have 12 counties. For those of you guys who have used Realist before, you may recognize that this has actually increased recently. In the last couple months, they've actually added an extra 4. It used to be that it was only 8 that they would allow. But on the left-hand side of the screen, we see which counties we're actually going to be, or which states we're going to have access to. The all states option here allows us to see all 77 counties and the other 7 counties from Arkansas. Now, there's one reason I want to bring this up, and that's because there is a couple that actually have a little overlap with things that are available in Oklahoma. Notably, down here at the bottom, we've got Washington, Arkansas, and Washington, Oklahoma. Washington, Oklahoma is where Bartlesville is. Washington, Arkansas is not. So oftentimes, if I'm working with people that are not near the border, I usually recommend that you just choose the Oklahoma option over here on the left. And now the only Washington that I'm seeing is the one that's going to be where Bartlesville is. So if I check that one, over here on the right-hand side, I'm going to see the counties that I have selected. So if I start adding in more, I've got Wagner, let's get in Creek. Let's also maybe get in Osage. Here we go. And how about Rogers as well? So I've got a decent selection here. Over on the right-hand side, though, you'll notice that beyond just showing us which counties we have selected and giving us an X to get rid of it, rather than just checking or unchecking the checkbox, it also provides me with what's called a recording date. Now, this recording date that we're seeing here is when we last got fresh data from that county. Now, this isn't the only place that we can actually see this information. So if I've gotten to the point where I've selected which counties I want, and I hit the apply button down here at the bottom, it's going to bring me back to my page. It'll tell me that my counties have been updated. As soon as that header disappears, we can see multiple counties selected. And also, as I'm holding my cursor over this, I can now see all of the different counties and what their most recent recording date was. So rather than having to go into change county to find out whether or not the information I'm looking at is recent or relevant, I can just hold my cursor over that up at the top and find out when it was. So as an example, you guys see here, we've got Wagner recording date was June 9th. What that means is that if I know for a fact, like I've already talked to the seller, I know the buyer, whatever, they've closed, and yet I'm still seeing that the tax record has not been updated to show that that new owner is in place. Double check the recording date and find out when that was, because it might be that if they closed on the 10th, they're not going to actually have the recording information up there yet. Oh, and we got a comment. I'm not sure what counties are where. Is there a place that shows the county positions? Actually, this is something that we're going to be covering a little bit later in class, but this is the easiest way that I've found, because I grew up in Colorado. I didn't really do too much moving around in the state. I pretty much just stayed in Jefferson County the whole time. So when I got to Oklahoma, I had to reintroduce myself to every county. The easiest way that I've found so far is to turn on this boundary option on the map and then just zoom in a little bit, and it'll start labeling which counties are which. So this was the easy way for me to find out, all right, we got Osage, Rogers, Wagner, Mulkey, Creek, and Washington, and just a Muskogee. No, Muskogee doesn't touch Tulsa County. But anyway, this is kind of how I started memorizing which ones were which, so that way I know, who's at least in my near vicinity. I also happen to have the Ardmore area, Love Creek or Love Carter. Wait, where did it go? Oh, here we go. Love Carter and Murray County. I accidentally went too far south. We got the Texas area, but this is the easiest way to kind of get familiarized with it, especially for me as an out-of-towner. I kind of had to learn all that stuff, but hopefully, yeah. Anyway, so once we've gotten our county selected, again, we can always double check our recording dates there. In my case, I'm actually just going to simplify this down. Now, you guys do not have to follow along with this, but I am going to be using just Tulsa County today. For those of you guys who are outside of Tulsa County, I apologize. This just happens to be where we have some prime examples of some of the content we're going to be discussing. So I'm going to start off with our quick search function. As you guys may have noticed, this was actually the very first thing that we saw as soon as we got signed into Realist. It's going to be broken down into 4 different criteria that we can search for. Address, which is going to be looking for effectively what you guys would type out if you were mailing somebody something with an envelope. We've got the owner name. Notably, it's going to be last, then first, or if you guys have some corporate name, like if it's a rental property or something like that. We've got an MLS listing number. This is literally just looking for that 7 or 6-digit number for the listing. And then we also have an APN or tax ID field. This is going to be something that's referred to in Realist as parcel ID. We'll be talking about that a bunch more later, but you may have realized that this is actually just going to be a whole bunch of options for if you have your information in hand already. I already have my address. I'm just going to dive right into it. I already know what the owner's name is. I just want to find out all their properties. I have a listing number or I have a tax ID, all in hand, ready to search. Hence, quick search. Now, just to give you guys an example of how this works, whenever you guys are running searches, whether with this quick search or with the My Search, you put in your criteria in the fields, and then it's going to offer either a selection down here in the results section here. This is what's referred to as the list. It'll put a bunch of dots on the map portion, and then we can actually zoom in to any of them or select one of them to find out more about them. If we end up putting in something that's going to provide us with too many results, it's going to ask for clarification. So I'm going to start with that one, and then we're going to whittle down our search to just one item. So let's start with something really large and plentiful results. So here I am typing in Johnson. Down here at the bottom, I see view results. There's 1,600 matches. So even before I've hit the search button, I already see how many matches I have. So you guys might recognize this particular function from Matrix as well. So if I hit search, it's going to ask me, hey, you've got a little bit too many results. Do you want to see the first 1,000? Perfect. I'll show first 1,000. And it's going to flood my map with a whole bunch of dots and fill in a whole bunch of results down here in the bottom. Now, if I wanted to see where a particular property was, I can click on it. It'll highlight it on my map. Or if I wanted to find out more about, let's say this one out here, select it, and it's going to do the exact same thing. And it also swings me down to where that particular property is right here. So fairly simple. If we do end up having a result that's less than that, it's going to show us just all of the results spilled onto the map immediately. So just dumps on the results, no show first 1,000 or anything like that. But let's say that we actually have the exact address. Well, we've been going through this. It's just been putting a dappling of dots on the map and showing us our results down here. But if we've searched for just one property, so in this case, I've got a property on Riverside we're going to use. So I've given it just enough information for it to show that I have one match. That's good news because I'm just typing in an address. So I'll just hit search. Now, instead of showing a bunch of dots on the map and showing us the results, since we only had one item, it's just going to go directly into the report for that particular property. This will dive right into the property details and show me all the information that I might need about the tax record information for this particular property. There's a back option right up here at the top, and that'll bring me back to my results. And notice it's already got a dot on the map and the one item down here in the results. If we need to jump back into this, there's a couple different ways for us to do this. We can either select the dot on the map and hit report, or down here in the results, just double click on it and it'll open up the report for you. All right, now let's move instead over to our My Search option. Now the My Search option is going to be pretty much the same basic idea, except this is going to allow us to do a little bit more with it. I'm going to scroll down here on this saved searches to the general query. There's 3 different search functions that are actually saved on your account. They just come as a default for all of the options in Realist. Starts off with our general query. then there's a foreclosure query, and a My Search default. Now, all three of these are system defaults and subsequently have a little golden padlock over here to the left, indicating that this is something that you do not have access to changing. This is actually for your benefit. The general query is effectively like the quick search that you guys are used to in Matrix, where there was a whole bunch of options that people were often searching for, and subsequently we decided we're just going to put all of these options into one basic search that everyone has. And that's what this general query option is going to do for you. At the top, it starts off with our owner name. Then we've got our house number, street name, and street suffix. So notice the address itself is broken down into its parts and pieces. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. We've got a subdivision option. This is a very simple search. It actually works effectively the same way that our county option did, except instead of it just showing a massive list of, good God, hundreds and hundreds of different subdivisions for each and every city, we're going to have a search function up at the top here. We can type in whatever the subdivision name might be, and then just check the checkboxes the same way that we did with the county names. It shows our list over here. We would hit apply, and it'll search within those subdivisions. We also have city, zip code, and for those of you guys working with vacant land or rural properties, we've also got a township, range, and section down here at the very bottom for those of you guys who are working with properties without 911 addresses. So I also wanted to point out a couple extra things here. When you guys are going through the street suffix section, just as a heads up, is only 4 characters long. So still trying to type in extra characters, nothing's happening. But what it's actually looking for is going to be the APE, BLVD, street, road, all that kind of stuff. So just bear that in mind, that whenever you guys are typing the rest of this stuff out, it's going to be looking for the full words or whatever. In this case, I wanted to search for a specific address. I'd have to type in 5125. Street name is Sandusky. And then I could put in the street suffix, but again, this house number and this street name have already provided me with my one match. Oh, and actually Sherry just asked, what if it is South Street? We're going to be talking about this in a little bit because we're actually going to customize this search for those kinds of instances. But not to worry, I'll circle back around to that. Fairly certain we cover that right after we get back from our break. Oh, and I should have mentioned this at the beginning of class, but we do have a break at the top of the hour just to make sure that you guys don't have to sit here listening to me for too long. According to my wife, that'll put people to sleep. So I'll do my best to keep it entertaining. So we've got 5125, we've got street name is Sandusky, and I'm going to go ahead and hit search. Now, just like we saw when we were running our search for this one on Riverside, if you're searching for a match, or if you're running the search for a single match, it's just going to dive directly into the report for this property. Now, before we discuss any of the extra search options, I wanted to show you guys what we're going to be looking at as the end result of whatever our search happens to be. So in my case, again, I'm looking for just this one property. This might be a owner that I'm going to be talking to about selling their property, or it might be a buyer whose property might be getting sold soon, and we just want to, find out what they're moving from and make sure that we get good specifications for where they want to move to. Whatever the case may be, once we've gotten in here, I can start off with this property details tab. This is going to be the first tab that it shows to you. Up at the very top, it's going to have a little synopsis of the specifications of this house. We've got the bedroom count, bathroom count, how many half baths, what the MLS sales price was. If there had not been an MLS sale for this property recently, it'll actually just show us a tax record sale. Then we also have when it was that it was sold, building square footage, lot size, etc. So most of these should be pretty self-explanatory, but I did want to point out something. While we're going through here, you're going to see this MLS prefix for a lot of things. What this is indicating is that this isn't necessarily information that's coming over directly from the tax record, but may have been pulled from the MLS. Now, this software that we're working with right now, Realist, is actually developed by the same company that makes Matrix. It's a company called CoreLogic down here at the bottom of Matrix. And then they've got their logos on Realist, not here, but somewhere else. Well, it's up here in the about Realist side. But anyway, we'll talk about that more later. But what's happened here is that there's some interconnectivity between Matrix and Realist, so that if there are any gaps on the tax record, we can still fill those in using the details from a particular listing. So the expectation is the listing agent should have gone through, done the research, made sure that everything was correct, and then presented that information into the listing. If that listing information ends up, I don't know, getting sold, for instance, you're going to end up having that information get solidified in there. So for instance, Tulsa County, I think also Washington County, for whatever reason, good or bad, they decided not to keep track of the bedroom count. So the information that we're seeing here under beds is again coming from the MLS. This was just the listing data's bedroom count from the last time it was listed. A little further down, we have a section here for the owner information. If there was two owners, we would see two different slots. It's not going to try and combine them into one. We also get to see the tax billing address. Realist is going to extrapolate whether or not this is an owner-occupied residence, whether this matches whatever the address is of the property we're looking at. A little further down, we have our location information. It's going to have our subdivision the exact way that it's meant to be displayed right here on the subdivision field. This is almost always going to be exactly what the county assessor's office has available. We noticed that some counties aren't always that way. In fact, actually that Love, Carter, and Murray County that I was mentioning earlier with our new Southern Oklahoma Board of Realtors, they do have a couple subdivisions that I personally have come across that are not named the exact same thing that the county has, but it's usually simplifications. Like in the county, it says the word section, and on Realist, it says SEC instead. So beyond that, this is a really easy way to double check what the subdivision is supposed to be for the property. And if you guys come across a property that you're trying to list and the subdivision is not already in Matrix, get in contact with us, give us the address, we'll look it up in Realist, and we'll get the information added for you. This is also an easy way to find out what the school district is for this property, as well as the township range and section. Again, township range and section is something that's required on every listing, so you'll have to make sure that that's put in. I did find this out recently. I was under the impression that the entire state was actually under a township range and section. The only portion of the state that is not is the Panhandle. So just north of Texas, for whatever reason, Texas doesn't have the township range and section, and apparently the Panhandle doesn't either. So the rest of the state, though, it should be covered. You may come across a couple areas or a couple counties, especially in Southern Oklahoma, that for some reason don't record that information. But again, it's still there as long as you're anywhere but the Panhandle. A little further down, we do have the tax parcel information. I mentioned this earlier, but there's a section on that search that was asking for the APN or tax ID. This tax parcel number is the actual number that it's looking for. So in Oklahoma, we call it a tax parcel. Some counties may even call what they use as the tax parcel number the account number. But either way that you guys are looking for it, I would try either the tax ID or tax parcel number. And if that's not working for your county, you can always double check the account ID. We've got the legal description for everything put in there as well. We've got a section here for the assessment and tax. This is, I guess, good information if they're looking for it, but the thing I'm most interested in is watching these trends. Since I've been using this particular property for all 4 years I've been working here, I've been watching this tax information since all the way back in 2017, or actually I think, no, it was 2016, the first time I looked at it. So I've been watching this go up and down and up and down, but notably in 2020, we ended up having a pretty massive decrease in how much they were having to pay. And it actually shows us not only the dollar value change, but also the percentage change. This was by far the most significant change. A little further down, we have the most important section, in my opinion. That's the characteristics. Now, the characteristics is where we're going to see, again, some of those prefixes for the MLS. This is just showing us that this is information that the county was not collecting and subsequently had to get pulled from the most recent listing. If you do find that there's a section on here showing MLS and then another section on the same line that shows tax, in fact, it'll actually be visualized like it does right here in this pop-up above where my cursor is. If there is a discrepancy between the two, it's going to show you both. So for instance, if I had total number of bathrooms was for some reason marked on the MLS as 4, but the tax record only showed 3, and then I came down here and found that, all right, well, 4 is how many the total baths were on the MLS because there was 3 full and 1 half, but the total number of bathrooms was not being updated on the tax record. It would show that discrepancy by visualizing it on the line itself. All right. I also wanted to point out, this is a question that we get asked a whole lot, no pun intended, but we actually have in our system a space for the lot's square footage. Notably, we actually don't let people put in the lot acres directly. It does have to be put in by square feet. It cannot be done by just marking the acres for the property. This is the easiest way that I've found to do this. You just come in here, you grab the lot area, and just paste that into matrix. If you guys don't see a lot area, especially if you guys are working in, again, some counties in southern Oklahoma, but also some properties that are just rural or vacant land, you may only see that they reference the lot acres. So if you guys are putting a listing into matrix and you guys don't have the lots square footage, but you do have the lot's acreage, you can come down here to the bottom where it's actually going to ask for that information in matrix, and it has the calculation already in here for you. So you guys can just grab this number, times it by the acres that are mentioned in Realist, and you'll be good to go. But a little further down beyond the characteristics, we also have the listing information. It's worth noting that what this is doing is actually showing up here at the top, the most recent listing, and then it goes to the one right before that, and before that. So in reverse chronological order. It only shows the most recent listing up at the top, and then again, these down below are just going to be any previous listings beyond that. If you'd like to, you can actually hit this little link here for the MLS listing number. This is actually going to do a history search within Matrix, and now we see all 4 of those particular listings. So again, the most recent one, the expired one, and then of course 2007, 2004. And we're going to, this is just a funny thing. I'm just going to point this out real quick. Back in 2004, again, a very, very long time ago, almost 20 years ago, we had $160 or $160,000. We're going to get to a section which I've already removed. Hold on, let me return that. I thought that wasn't the next section we were supposed to see. There it is. Its current estimated value is well over double that, which is just nutty. I have some friends who bought a house even just 12 years ago, and it's already almost tripled in value. It's wild. The market's crazy right now. Anyway, we do have access to effectively seeing all of the listing data from the past. But let me actually circle back around since I missed something here. We've got our sell score indicator as well. This is something I wouldn't necessarily recommend you guys actually put any stock in. Just take it with a grain of salt. This is effectively trying to be the real estate Nostradamus on effectively a property by property basis. So this is allowing you guys to see whether or not this particular property is going to have characteristics or is in a neighborhood or a market that's actually really hopping. Interestingly enough, when I was teaching this class in 2020, this score went from, I want to say it was like in the low 300s through all of these, all the way up into the very high section. I think it capped off somewhere around like 850, whatever 850 actually means. But this was indicating to us that the likelihood that this particular property was going to be sold was very high. So if I were already talking to this client, it really would be kind of futile. I've already got the client in hand and I'm just, researching their information and, oh, look, it's got a high likelihood that it's going to sell. Yeah, well, of course, I'm selling it. But this number also obviously did not tie to any actual sales. You guys saw up above or down below, excuse me, that the last time this sold was in 2012. Meanwhile, this again was all the way up here in the very high, indicating that it was supposed to have at least been listed. So you can kind of take a look at this, see if this might be of any value to you. More often than not, I don't think it will be, but just double check it to see, because this might be really handy if you guys are trying to farm an area. You guys can see what the sell score indicator is for that area. Maybe that might translate to some interest on the seller's part. The next section down is actually going to be our estimated value. Just to give you guys some context for where we are, I accidentally left this off from the last time I was teaching this class, but right after our characteristics is the sell score indicator, the estimated value, and then the listing information, which we've already covered. But estimated value, this is going to be something that's been developed by Realist directly. So this is not a Zillow's estimate or anything like that, but it is still what that Zestimate is actually called, which is a oh, that's right. Sorry, we're trying to find out what the AVM, because there's a few different ways that the AVM is referred to. Automated valuation model was one. Automated value method was another version. Regardless of what the actual acronym means, this is effectively just the digital estimate. They've got an algorithm that they're running. They're trying to find out what the value of the property is. And in this case, it looks like it's worth, somewhere between 2 to 3 times as much money as it was so long ago. This confidence score is actually an important element of this. I've gotten to see this number dramatically change. So it used to be that this was actually a 60 to 100 confidence score range. So if it was below 60, it just would not even provide any estimate whatsoever. Eventually, they dropped it down to 50. I think at the lowest point, it was like somewhere around 80, or excuse me, not 80, 60 for the confidence score. It was at the very bottom of its estimation abilities. It's dramatically increased even just over the last 6 months. So what this number is actually showing us is that this value and this range is something that it's very confident with. It also used to be that this forecast standard deviation was also higher as well. The higher this number gets, the more the range is broader. Meanwhile, this confidence score being lower broadens this range, and this number becomes increasingly less and less relevant. The more narrow both of these become, the more accurate this estimate might be. All that being said, though, oftentimes you guys might not want to trust a computer to give you the value of your property, so you can remove this as well as the sell score indicator with this customized view option up here at the top. Now, I'm going to cover the rest of these fields and then we'll talk about the customized view. A little bit beyond our listing information, again, this is going to be data that got pulled from Matrix, is going to be the information that got pulled from the county records. So this last market sale and sales history is indicating to us every time this property has changed hands according to the tax records. Now in this case, instead of just showing us like it does up here, the last listing, this shows us the last time it changed hands, and then it immediately copies that information down here under the, effectively again, the reverse chronological order. So we can see it in order all the way back to the very first time this property was sold back in 1993. So going back through this, just to give you guys a heads up on some of the details of how this will be displayed, it's going to show us the sales price, as well as when it was that it supposedly closed, when it was that that information got recorded. So notice that there is a discrepancy here between the tax record showing that it closed on the 29th and the MLS getting it closed on the 11th. This is a problem. That would have been a violation in this case. We've got the buyer's name, the seller's name. But then if I go back to 2008, there's a notable omission. We don't see a sales price, but instead there's this little Y on the field called nominal. This is indicating that this was actually just a changing of hands. No money changed hands, but the property did go from one person to another. Or in this case, if we go back to 2007, we see that Tara Brother ended up buying the house for $193,000. And then subsequently, Tara R, as we see here, apparently got married and is now married to Robert Cope. And so they ended up changing it from her name to both of their names. But of course, I guess since they're married, it's kind of just a weird idiosyncrasy. Meanwhile, if we go back a little bit further, we can see that Charles and Eileen Cannon ended up moving it into the Eileen Cannon Trust. Again, just a nominal change, no money changed hands. I also wanted to point out, we've got the property here, whether there, I'm almost positive that this was when there was actually a house, and then the Armstrongs ended up selling it to Espo Construction Company for at least what I have been told was some kind of like catastrophic damage to the house and had to be repaired. And subsequently, Espo Construction Company eventually sold it to the Cannons for $160,000. So it's just interesting to go back and see all of the history of these properties as time goes on. A little bit further down, we also have our mortgage history and then two different property maps. One that's going to show the parcel dimensions. Again, these are just estimates. Any little rounded portions of the property are going to end up being broken down into segments. Notice here we've got each segment actually has a value. I want to just give you guys that little extra skepticism about this. If you guys see something that looks like this, just assume that whatever the sum total of this number is not the actual number of this curve. Now, the reason I mention that is just that this 18 might be 18.4, and then we've got 21.3, and then 21.4, and then 19.3 or something like that. And the total of this ends up being a foot or two off. So just assume that all of this information is an estimate. It even tries to mention that down here at the bottom, but just keep that in mind. This should be like larger in red or something like that, but this is not the actual specifications of the property. And you guys might notice, it's a little bit hard to see here, but if I go back to the map, I can zoom in a little bit. You guys see that that parcel line is actually going to be, let me see if I can select it. And we'll get the parcel dimensions. We're going to cover this in a moment here, but you can see that there's just a little portion of the outline that's been added on here is outside of the parcel's dimensions. So again, the GPS information that's on here is going to be 100% accurate. The information that you guys are seeing of where buildings are physically located or any of the actual numbers that are showing up on here might need to be taken from the perspective of like, this is not exactly where everything is or exactly how large or long any of these dimensions are. But again, we'll see a little bit more about that later. And then also over to the right of the lot dimensions, we have just a little contextual view, allowing us to see a little bit more about where this property is physically located. So all of the information that we've gone through so far has only been under this property details page. I wanted to mention just a couple things to kind of make your lives and your brains be able to process this information, make your brains not have to see stuff that's going to conflict with what you guys are already working on. So this cell score indicator, this estimated value, maybe we don't want those fields. Up here at the top right corner, there's going to be a customize view button. I'm going to uncheck the cell score indicator, or you guys can go over here to the right and see the list and get that estimated value out of there as well. If you guys don't want to see the mortgage history, you guys can also remove that. If there was any foreclosure information, it would have shown up on there, but since there was not, it didn't even show that field. So I'm going to hit apply. And now, just like I saw it when I first got in here, since I forgot to turn those back on, we go straight from characteristics into the listing information. So we've removed the cell score indicator and the estimated value. One other note with the customized view, let's take a look at the characteristics section here. Or actually, I'm going to zoom up to the top. We'll take a look at the location information. So when you guys are looking at this information, what we're seeing here is only the fields that are actually filled by the county information. If there's not any information from the county, but we have it in the listing, it may get filled in. But oftentimes you guys might notice that there's something that you saw on a different listing that you just cannot find on this next listing. And most of the time what that boils down to is just that this was an empty field that is no longer visible. If I go up to the customized view, I can switch between its default, which again is only going to be showing the attributes that have a value in them, to being all of the attributes that are available regardless of whether or not they have information. So our dynamic view is the default. The fixed view that I'm about to show you, you can switch to. But what it's going to do is actually dramatically expand how many sections are available, but they might be empty. So remember earlier I mentioned that right now we only see one owner. If there was a second owner on the house, they would be filled in this field. But in this case, again, we don't have a second owner, so it's just showing it blank. Same thing goes with our location information. This is not a property in a historical preservation district or zoning. Subsequently, those fields are empty. But again, if I was not on the fixed view, I would not even see these. A little further down under our characteristics, you may remember that the characteristics actually only took up exactly the portion of the page that I had visible. It's now significantly longer. Now, the reason I mentioned both removing those extra sections that we might not want to see, as well as showing you guys this fixed view, is to make sure you guys are understanding what you can remove, because whatever is visible or whatever is visible on the page right now is going to be what gets sent to the printer if you guys try to print this. Now, I'm going to cover the print and email options a little bit more in depth later, but I do want to show you guys, I'm currently looking at all of the fields, as well as the fixed. So when I go up to the print here and do a quick print, it's going to create a PDF for me that includes all of those fields and all of those sections. Again, this is showing me a whole lot of blanks. It's just taking up an unnecessary amount of space and ends up spilling over onto 3 different pages. But if I want to send this off to somebody, I don't want to show them a whole bunch of blanks. So what I'm going to do is actually come back here, switch us back to the dynamic view, get rid of my cell score and my estimated value. Let's also maybe get rid of the mortgage history. There we go. Come back to my quick print. And again, it's going to oblige whatever visual changes you've made. And now we're down to just 2 pages. Makes it a lot easier to see this stuff. So if you guys do end up in a situation where you're wanting to print this out, maybe you guys need to deliver this to buyer's agent, seller's agent, whatever, you guys can provide all that information in a little bit more succinct format. Before I forget this, add those back on there. There we go. Can we do that with the sales piece? Yes, yeah, any of the sections on here you guys can actually get rid of. So if you just, because that sales, last market sale and sales history, depending on the county information, oh yeah, you can for sure get rid of the sell score. Yeah, just uncheck that checkbox. Oh, you do want it on there? Yeah, just leave that checkbox on there. It is actually the default to have all of these options already turned on. Yeah, so whenever you guys are looking at this, if you have not made any of those customized view changes, you should see that sell score indicator anyways. Oh yeah, and again, up at the top, we've got the print and email options. The quick option right now is going to just grab whatever tab you happen to be on. We're going to be going through these extra tabs over here. We've got comparables, market trends, neighbors, and neighborhood profile. The first 2 and the last 2 can all be included under a customize. So the customize option allows us to include different tabs on there if we would like. All right. Let's actually move on now to the Comparables tab. The Comparables tab is going to allow us to effectively run a CMA that's kind of automated. I should point out to you guys, just as a heads up, as with any other system that just tries to automatically provide you information, it's always good to take it with a grain of salt, or maybe do your own research on it just to ensure that the information that it's provided is accurate. Doing your own research isn't something I always recommend, but in this case, it might be valuable to jump back into Matrix, double check if there's any other listing information that might not have been included. But for us, what I had show up on this when I first landed here is just going to be these 5 comparable listings. There's a generate report button up here at the top. So if I just jumped in here and was happy with whatever it provided to me and I just wanted to move on with my life, this generate report button will solidify whatever information I have, put it into a nice report, shows me my map up here at the top, shows my search criteria, shows my statistics, high, low, median, and average. And then we also have a side-by-side comparison down at the bottom. Now, there's one major problem with running this way. If you guys do not have any really valuable data, so like in this case, we've got one that's $88,000 versus, I don't know, the rest of these, which are triple that at least, that might not be showing us everything that we want. Now, there's a couple different ways for us to adjust this. Up here at the top right corner is going to be a search criteria button. This is where we're going to get the opportunity to change how many comparables it's going to be finding. I usually recommend somewhere between 20 and 30 if you guys want to, just to see if it's available. You guys can always just max that out at 50. The sort method, I would always just recommend leaving this as well as all of these associated ones on the default. Make sure that your tax source is set to both. Now, the reason I say this is probably the best option is because this isn't just going to limit you to the comparables that it can find on the tax record. This is also going to include any of the listings that are currently available. For those of you guys who have been through our CMA class or have learned about CMAs in the past, that's actually an incredibly important element. It's always, always, always good to make sure that you guys are including stuff that's currently on the market, because the stuff that's currently on the market is also a very important gauge of what the markets or market values are for that area. But you guys are familiar with that. Location, 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 right? A little bit further down, we also have a distance from subject. This is one of the few pieces of information that I would actually recommend playing with, depending on your property that you're working with. So again, changing the number of comparables, changing the distance from the subject are both important ones to change. If we don't find as many properties as we want in a certain area, you can expand that area. And then we also have a little bit further down a search time period. This is the only other field that I would actually recommend messing with often, is going to be, again, distance and the time frame. So this time period at the moment is always going to be set to 6 as a default. It goes all the way up to a whole year back. Now, as you guys might be painfully aware, the market has been pretty wild. So going back beyond 12 months wouldn't even be a good idea to begin with. But even going back 12 months right now might actually give you some pretty dramatically different results. No more evidence than, no more evidence of that problem than back when we were doing this class in 2021. Because if you went back a whole year, you'd be working with an entirely different market that was in the midst of the explosion. Oh, just as a clarification, we got into this area by going to the search criteria button up at the top right. But change your months back to something that's appropriate for whatever market you're working in or whatever area you're working in. And then a little further down, we've got living and building area. I might suggest adjusting this only if you end up having too many results. The 15% difference is actually pretty decent. I usually recommend people turning that down if they find too many results, just because, again, narrowing either the living or building area or lot area might actually make all the difference in the world with what results you're finding. If you guys are just trying to get a lot of information, you can always increase or decrease the lot area first and then the living or building area second. The final two options, don't worry about. It's already set for you. You're good to go. Now, for those of you guys who are working in areas that may require a lot of like expansion of the distance from subject or how many months back you go, if you set this to the defaults that you think are going to work the best for you, there's a save and submit button down here at the bottom. Save in this case is actually indicating I'm going to be saving all of these settings that I have here so that the next time I try and run a comparables, it's going to automatically assume all of this information. So if you guys are working in a really rural area, maybe you want to set it to a mile away. Maybe you want to set this to 9 months back. Maybe you want to end up having the lot area be a little bit expanded, whereas the building area, we want to close down a little bit. I can just do save and submit. And then the next time I try and run a comparables tab, it's going to automatically have used all of these search criteria. In my case, if I wanted to, at least make sure that I'm only doing it for this particular property, I'm just going to use the submit button instead. So again, save and submit keeps all of the details that we've changed. Submit just says, I'm only going to use it for this particular one. Go ahead and run it. So since I've expanded my search out, I've got 15 matches now. My map just filled up. It's showing me some stuff over to the east of Fortune Park, which is probably not going to be relevant. And of course, the same thing goes with all this stuff that's above I-44. So this is where we get into the final portion of the process. What I'm looking at here is I've actually got a bunch of properties that I want to get rid of. And so down below, I'm actually going to just zoom this in a little bit. I'm going to scroll down to number 9. Let's get rid of number 9. That's the checkbox or that dot up there. Looks like 12, 13, and 14 all need to be removed as well. So what I'm doing is just unchecking the checkboxes for them. And this allows me to narrow my scope to just the ones that I want. Since you don't get to actually draw like a shape on here, this is unfortunately the way that you're going to have to go. Take away 8, take away number 6, take away number 5, number 2, and number 3. Okay, so now I'm down to just 6. Again, for those of you guys who are really familiar with this area, do not take this as a legitimate comparables. I'm just trying to illustrate, trying to put this into this little block here instead. But I've got my results. Now that I've actually made sure that everything is the way that I want it, now I can hit that generate report and send this off to my client with confidence, because I know that the results that I found, all 5 of these results here, should be valuable information. Now, just to clarify something that we already talked about, but we've got those 2 buttons, the email and print option. When I do a quick print, it's just going to take, again, whatever tab that I happen to be on. So in this case, when I first showed this to you, I was on the property details tab. Now that I'm on the comparables tab, I hit quick print, it's only going to show the information from this report that I just created. If you do end up choosing to do the other option, which in this case would be the customize print, if you have not messed with the comparables tab, so remember we went through and changed the search criteria and did a whole bunch of stuff with checking and unchecking checkboxes. If I didn't care to actually do that, just trusted that the system was going to provide something of value, when I land on my property details page at the very beginning of this process, there's going to be an option to just do customize print, and it's just going to run it with whatever search criteria you have as your default. So just bear that in mind, that this customize print option or even the customize email option may end up allowing you guys to include this, but it may not always be valuable information for your client. It might be good to actually verify it first. But next tab over is going to be our market trends tab. This is one of the few that's actually not available on the customize option. There's a quick print option if you guys want to use that. That's about it. There's only a couple things on here that I would actually recommend that you guys take a look at. And it's going to be right up here at the very top: median sales price and median list price. It's going to be broken down into zip, city, and county. Each of those has their own color coordinated line on this graph. And I want to point out why these two are important. This will be the last thing we cover, and then we're going to take a quick break. But the median sales price, It's broken down into the tax record information, and then it also breaks it down into the MLS information. Now, this could pretty easily let us know, where we're sitting. So right now I see that for this zip code in May, it was 251,000. Meanwhile, up here for the median sales price, the very last dot is going to be from March. Wait a second. So if I scroll down here, this is just good advice, even outside of right now what we're doing. If you guys are looking at any bars, graphs, charts, anything, anywhere on the internet, anywhere in the newspaper, anywhere on the news, always verify what you guys are looking at, especially if you see a side-by-side chart. A lot of people are lying to people just by showing you numbers without as much context as you might require. So in this case, what I'm seeing here is that the time frame is going to be March to March. Meanwhile, the time frame for my MLS side of things, because this is fresher, easier to access data for Matrix and Realist, it's going to be May to May. So I might see these two things and be like, oh, well, it's one bar down from the top here. So I might automatically not look at this and think, oh, well, this is higher than the bar down here. That's not true. Even the top of this is 300 versus 250. Now, this is why it's valuable to at least see this information on the computer, because I can actually compare side by side. So here's March, 214. Here's March of the MLS side of things, 234. So there's a $20,000 difference. And this, again, is the reason why I think these two charts are valuable. If you ever end up in a situation where you have to validate the importance of having a realtor, or effectively sell the idea of using a realtor to a client, you can show these two charts and just illustrate, look, in March of this year, the stuff that was selling on the tax record, which includes for sale by owner, which includes any kinds of like familial exchanges of properties, stuff like that. Just anytime there was a property that changed hands with a value of money, there's going to be an average, median, high, low, etc. It's going to be showing us the median of that in this case. I see that it's 214. If I go and compare the exact same time frame with the information from the MLS, I see the things from the MLS that have had a realtor's hand have gotten 20,000 extra dollars. This could be incredibly valuable for you as an agent to try and validate that you are going to be able to do more than they can for themselves. So like in February, 215. Meanwhile, in the MLS, 247. So there's a huge amount of value that you can glean from this just by showing it to your clients. Just remember to indicate to them, well, you indicate to yourself as well, because you don't want to confuse yourself with the information, that this is a different x-axis and a different y-axis. Make sure that you're validating that and showing only the comparable information. Because otherwise you're going to be like, well, yeah, 251 versus 214, but that's 2 months apart. This could do an upward trend the same way that we're seeing here in the MLS. Anyway, I'm going to head over now to the Neighbors tab. Don't use this. It's available if you guys want it. You can print it if you want to, but just as a heads up, I've heard some horror stories of showing the neighborhood or the neighbor information, and then people are like freaking out because, oh, they've got, a bunch of properties here that are for rental, and then they don't want to live in that neighborhood, or they see a name that they don't like. Like, wait, there's tar water in this area? No, that's just their name. But as you guys can imagine, seeing some other names might elicit more violent responses depending on who you guys are working with. But yeah, just don't use this tab. When we get back from our break, we're going to talk about our neighborhood profile and then some extra search options. So it is just shy of 10:05. So let's meet back here at 10:15. So I'm going to go ahead and put the music back on and put the video back on the screen. I will be polling you guys to make sure everybody's returned, but I will see you guys in just a bit. right. Nope. Chill out, music. Okay. We are back. Move this out of the way. Come on. There we go. All right. Welcome back, everybody. If you guys don't mind, go ahead and hit that raise hand button down at the bottom of the screen. Just want to make sure that everybody's returned. Just as a heads up, this is something that I'll require because we need to make sure that everybody is actually back. Then I can give you guys the CE credit, which hopefully we all want, right? And I see a couple people who don't have their hand raised. Oh, thank you. Sherry, Stephen, if you guys are there, if you wouldn't mind, hit that raise hand button. Let's just get this out of the way, then we can go ahead and carry on. Well, Sherry, Stephen, if you guys are there, go ahead and hit that raise hand button or write something in the chat or something. The rest of you guys, I've got your attendance marked. I appreciate it. All right, I'm gonna lower everybody's hands. So the final step that we're on, let me make sure that I actually have everything turned on here. Okay, perfect. It's gonna be our neighborhood profile. So the neighborhood profile boils down to a synopsis of all of the information that's available as far as the demographics for this particular zip code. Now, it used to be a lot more obvious that this is what was happening, that we would see the zip code marked up here and it would say population according to US Census Bureau for, and then it'll show the zip code or something. They cleared a lot of that out just to kind of simplify this, or in this case, oversimplify this. But not to worry, you guys should be able to figure that out oftentimes just based on this zip code or the population, excuse me, because obviously Tulsa's way larger than this. Tulsa County is even larger than that. So it's going to be pretty obvious, but just as a reminder, it's just going to be showing the data for this zip code. And again, it doesn't show the source of most of this information, but pretty much everything on here is going to be the Census Bureau. There is going to be some information on the, I think under the quality of life section. Yeah, it's just the quality of life section. That's going to be coming over from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I just happen to remember that from way back in the day. I don't know if you guys know the difference between blue collar and white collar, but that's usually somebody who's a shot collar. Anyway, a little bit higher up at the top, we've got our age range breakdown. We've got gender breakdown, marital status breakdown. We've got the housing information showing how many properties are rented versus owned versus vacant. When I first started teaching this class, this vacant number was significantly smaller. Like, I want to say it was like lower than 3% or something. It might have been 1% at one point. But a lot of properties are no longer owned. There's a lot of properties that are being rented. We can see what the rental values are. A little further down, we have the quality of life information showing worker information, white collar versus blue collar. I don't know why this is not, it's probably a visual thing. Is it? Well, anyway, I'll find out what's happening with that. We've also got the household income. Again, this is just another one of those weird things that I've noticed over time, but this used to have a section up here at the top that was the 200 to 250, and then another one that was above that that was, thank you, Carrie. I was hoping somebody caught that. There was another one that was the 250 to, I think, 500. Like it does a dramatic jump at some point. There were some people that lived in this neighborhood that were, up in that range, but apparently have moved away. Average household income down here at the bottom, which is always just really interesting to see the average household income versus some of these rental prices. But anyway, a little further down, we also have the commute method. And some of this stuff isn't really going to make too much of a difference. Oh, wow, everybody drives. Big surprise. A significant amount of people work from home now, which is interesting. Some people self, bikes, walking. And then, of course, since we live in America, the public transit is trash, so it's hard to get around. But we have the weather as well. This is going to be crucial for anybody that's moving in from out of state. I wish that I had seen this before I got here because this would have made my heart very happy. And this would have reminded me that I'm going to die in the middle of July. So down here towards the bottom, we also have an education section right next to the school section. It's important to note that this education climate index is actually indicating how many of the how many people in the population have achieved what level of education. Bear in mind, we also have a significant number of people that are not actually in any way, shape, or form having graduated from high school or college yet. So there is still a lot of people in that range. And subsequently, when we look at this education climate index, don't just assume that because this number is lower that there's less educated people. It might be that there's plenty of educated people, they just have a bunch of kids. So a little further down, we also have, again, the school district information. This is going to be showing us all of the schools that are available nearby. Just to repeat that, this is showing just the stuff in the proximity of the property. So not, this is not where they're going to be sending their kid. This is not necessarily where they're going to be sending their kid. These are just schools nearby. And notice I also have included the private as well as the public information. There's only an elementary school nearby, and apparently I'd be willing, I don't know this, but I'd be willing to bet some Christian school or Buddhist, I don't know. Anyway, a little further down, we've got the eating and drinking, shopping, and there's going to be some other categories, all of which is going to be available up under this search criteria option. So what we're seeing here again is just the neighborhood profile. This is just automatically grabbing the details from this zip code. And up at the top right corner, we've got that search criteria that allows us to narrow down the information a little bit further. So the business information that we saw, at the moment, I only had the eating and drinking on there. This was also only going to be within a mile of the property. Same thing goes for our schools. We can choose all of the different school types, see all of those selected, and then choose between public and private or both. And then again, if I wanted to expand this out, I can change the distance from the subject, which goes all the way up to 10 miles. So if you guys want to make any changes that are permanent to this, so that the next time you see the neighborhood profile, you see only the information that you've added, so like if there's banks or automotive services, whatever you guys actually wanted to add on here, you can save and submit. Just like we saw before, save and submit will save these changes permanently, and then we can make modifications to an individual report by hitting the submit button. All right. Now, I also wanted to mention one last time, our print options are only going to be breaking down into quick print, which grabs just these details, customized print, which is going to allow us to get an amalgamation of all 4 or some combination thereof. And then we also have our email option, which we haven't discussed yet. Now, the quick email works the exact same way. It's just going to grab this tab that I happen to be on. So if I'm on the property details and I choose to do the email, it's going to grab the property details tab. Customize email does the exact same thing as the customized print, but there's going to be one major difference between the print and the email. When we do the email, it's just going to offer the information here, and it does not show you a preview of the PDF. It's just going to send this off to whatever email address you sent this to, any CC or BCC that you set up, and you're good to go. I believe this is something that you have to do the first time at least, but there is a reply to field that may be empty the first time you guys load into this. Make sure that you put in whatever your email address is. So your work or your company email, whatever. This reply to option is what will happen, or is what the email address will be if the client takes this Realist email and hits reply on it, because then they'll be just sending an email back to you. And I actually did test this the other day to make sure that it works. If you send something off to a client and they reply to that email, even if it says that it's from, corelogic.com or realtor.com, realist.com, whatever it is, they're going to end up sending an email to you instead. Also, my lame joke for the day. Do you guys know who the patron saint of emails is? It's St. Francis of Assisi. Anyway, bad jokes. All right, I'm gonna hit the back button. So we're all done with all of this. The only other extras are transaction desk. This just allows us to start a transaction with this property, and the value map option, which is just effectively a map that shows all of the estimated values nearby. That's about it. But heading back, we're gonna now talk about our extra search options and our view options. So first and foremost, whenever we're looking at the default view, this split view, it's going to show us the map up at the top and then the list of results down here at the bottom. If we ever want to change this, there's two buttons up here at the top that allow us to switch over to just the map or just the list. But watch what happens when I click on this list button. It actually brings me over into a little different view than what I was just looking at. This is what's called the card view. So effectively, it puts these little, playing card style shapes on here with some details about the properties. Now, this little illustration that it has in here will be replaced by any of the most recent listing photos. So the primary photo should be showing up here. We also have, again, just some basic details about it. And we also have down here at the very bottom, just bedroom count, bathroom count, and how large the property is, or how large the house is. I wanted to point out this little weird spot right here that's just empty next to where the bed icon is. Again, this is grabbing just from the county information. It does not grab the bedroom count from the MLS for the card view. Now, since I don't like the card view that much, and again, it's just taking up a bunch of negative space with the illustration that's useless to me, I'm going to switch back over to the table view up at the top right. Now, the table view and card view can be switched, and you can also do that even while you're on the split view if you have enough screen real estate to do so. But in my case, I'm actually just going to hit this clear all button. Let's now talk about our search options. So over here on the far left, I've already switched over to the My Search option. At the beginning of class, I indicated that I was going to be using this general query option. But if there's something on here that is not useful to me, or like Sherry had mentioned earlier, what do we do if we end up needing to search for a property that's got a pre-directional or post-directional or both in order to clarify that information? That's when we're going to start using this customized search option. Now, I'm going to be customizing the search, even though when I open this up, it actually says that this is a padlocked icon. I cannot make any changes to this. And over here to the right, I see all my selected attributes. I can't move them. I can't close them out. I can't uncheck their checkboxes, but I can check new checkboxes. So I'm going to head over here to the left where we've got the owner information. And I'm going to say that I want to add on owner occupied. Now I'm going to be clicking here. So just remember, this is where I'm checking my checkbox. But over here to the right, as well as up here at the top, we're going to be noticing some pretty significant changes. So keep your eyes over here on the selected attributes, and I'm going to check this checkbox. As soon as I check that checkbox, everything becomes available to be modified. And up here at the top, you notice that I no longer have the general query and that golden padlock. This is now saying type search name. So what I've effectively done is I've actually taken the exact same search function that I was just using, and now I've got the availability of taking what those options were and removing any of the ones I don't want, so like this township, range, and section, moving anything around, so I can click and drag this owner occupied to have that be the first option. And then I can also add in any additional options, like I want to get my pre-directional, post-directional, and I can save all of this with the name that I want it to be. So I'm going to put my pre-direction before the street name. So now I have owner occupied, owner name, house number, pre, street, suffix, and post, and then of course subdivision, city, and zip code, which were all valuable to me. So rather than having to go check all these checkboxes again because I started a brand new blank search, I just take the one that was already serving me pretty well, make some modifications to it, and then just save it with its name. So class 7-6. So I'm going to hit save. So I've saved this. But once we've made any changes, if I actually want to start searching with this, I have to hit the apply button. That brings me back to my page where I've got the owner occupied, owner name, house, pre, street, street suffix, post, and so on. Now, let's actually do a practical search. And again, this was something Sherry had mentioned earlier. I was going to bring it up anyway, but when we're looking at the My Search section, there's some extra options on here as well. And we didn't see, or we didn't mess with these when we were looking at the quick search, but quick search also includes a couple of these choices. So for instance, the owner name we can do is, starts with, or include. And then we also have the option to add things so that if I type in, let's say, again, Zollner, there we go, I can hit the plus, and now I can add in another name for our search. So in this case, maybe I'll just do, let's see if there's anybody with that name. There is, perfect, all right. So I've got 2 of those added on there. Maybe I can find my uncle. Oh, that added up a whole bunch. So as you guys can see, even just typing it up here without putting the plus is allowing me to do this search, and that search. And it combines all the results down here at the bottom. Because notice every time I added something on here, it's increasing the number only. It's not removing anything. The same thing works whenever you guys are doing the house number, pre-directional, street, all that kind of stuff, but that's usually not going to be as useful. In this case, we actually want to take a look at the is dropdown. We've got is between, is greater than, or is less than. Now, the is pretty cut and dry. You put in the number, that's what it's searching for. So again, 1373. I wanted to put in my street name, Riverside, easy peasy. I find my one match, I'm happy, I'm done. But let's say that I have a little bit more complicated search. So I was talking to a client. They told me what their address was. I vaguely remember a portion of it, but not all of it. It was somewhere around the 15 to 1600 block on Peoria. So I'm going to do is, set this over to is between instead. Now I've got 2 fields available. If I wanted to maybe just say, I know it was somewhere south of 15th on Peoria, I can do is greater than, and then just set in 1500 and Peoria. But watch what happens when I do this. If I do is greater than, and I put Peoria on here, it's going to spend a little bit of time finding all of the matches that are on Peoria that are over 1500. Now, when I end up doing the search for this, and again, this is not something that I would recommend doing, but just to illustrate the problem with this, when I've run this search, there's going to be this interesting little gap right here where we have all of the properties that are 0 to 1500 and 0 to 1500. Now, the reason I said that twice is because, again, North Peoria and South Peoria. That's why it's important to make sure that we have this pre-directional put in and make sure that you're using the right conditional information. So I'm going to do 1500 to 1600 instead, and make sure that I'm only doing Peoria South. So now when I run my search, aha, it's one of these properties, and I'm done. So it's very easy to try and narrow these down as long as you make sure that you get that customized search used and make sure that you guys are using the proper conditions. I also wanted to point out something else with anything that requires a name. So owner name has this, as well as the street name. There's going to be an is, starts with, or include. Now, when I was running my searches for particular individuals or particular names, all I was running was just the starts with option. Now, the starts with option is a great place to begin your search, but let's say that maybe you're not finding who you thought you were going to find. You can just use this include instead, because watch what happens. If I do Zollner now, it's actually going to say that I have more matches than what I had originally searched for. This is going to be including anywhere that includes the word Zollner, anywhere in Tulsa County. And notice this is just giving me an absurd number of matches. So this might not be useful here, but I switch this over to starts with, I'm going to decrease that. And if I switch this over to is, it becomes completely useless. 0 matches. So make sure that you guys are using the right one. The street name is going to be a little bit more important on that one. So is going to be just a direct one-to-one. Any character you type in here is going to be what it searches for. Starts with might be a little bit better if you have something that you don't know how to spell. Like, is it sequoia or sequoia? Doesn't matter if I just type in Bessie. There we go. None. None. There we go. And if I run my search, I can see all of those. If I add in any pre-directional, post-directional suffixes, it's going to help. We addressed already the subdivision search, but again, just as a reminder, Minshall Park, run my search, check my checkboxes. I'm only going to grab those 4, run my search, and it'll fill the map up with just that subdivision, which, just as a side note, this isn't even all of Minshall Park, and it's already 649 properties, which is just bonkers. Anyway, we also have the city and zip code in here. I'm not going to mess with those, but that's about it for our search criteria. Again, there's a lot of extra options, and if you guys are ever working with foreclosure properties, the foreclosure query is a great place to start. But again, even though this has a padlock on it, when we go into customize search, if I want to add owner occupied, which I guess ooh, that feels hurtful to the people in foreclosure. But anyway, if you have an owner occupied property, you could change that and do custom foreclosure search. Perfect. And save that for yourself. All right. Now I'm going to head back. I'm just going to go back to our general query. And I'm actually going to start moving towards teaching about the map. So I'm going to clear all my results off. That clears my map, clears my results, clears any of the search criteria. And we're going to switch over to just the map view over here. And then I'm actually going to collapse my search down as well. Now, this is going to provide me with just the map. This is a great way for us to kind of zoom in to certain areas. As you guys start to zoom in, you're going to start noticing that some of the neighborhoods look like they've got teeth. This is actually the parcel lines being drawn onto the map. When you click on any of these parcels, it's going to actually highlight that parcel for you so that you can see the property in question. There's a couple buttons underneath each of the little pop-ups here. This is indicating a zoom in function, which allows us to kind of center it on the screen. We also have a parcel dimensions option. This is the one that I hit earlier where I can just click on that and it just shows me the parcel dimensions. Function that shows the addition names. No, and actually this is kind of a thing that I don't like about Tulsa in general. We don't have a lot of codified neighborhood names, which is how a lot of that stuff will be displayed. So you won't be able to find like, oh, what's the name of this subdivision? You're gonna have to actually like click on one of those properties, hit the report, and then you can see the subdivision from here. So like if I wanted to see Livingston Park, you can use that to run your search. But yeah, there is some neighborhood names that you guys might see on here. You just have to zoom out to a certain level and it'll start providing those little burgundy labels on them. Like here we got Livingston Park, but which there's a spot. I feel like most of South Tulsa has a really good grasp of making sure that's on there. I feel like North Tulsa does not, though. That's a little better nowadays. Anyway. Hey, that's where I used to live. All right, zoom back out. We also have some search options. So again, if I wanted to search for this particular neighborhood, there's going to be a button over here to the left. That's going to be our shape drawing tools. This is going to allow us to do either radius, rectangle, or polygon. Now, the radius one, fairly simple. Click in one spot, drag away. That's your search. We've got the rectangle tool. Again, same basic premise. Click, drag, wherever you're dragging to, and then let go is going to be the shape. All of this can be modified using these little handles. You guys can just grab one of those handles and make it smaller or larger. Same thing goes with the rectangle. Make this smaller, larger. You can even do one edge on the rectangles if you just click and drag from one of the kind of faint dots there. Make it larger, smaller. And then we also have the option of doing the polygon tool. This is the one that I actually want to highlight a little bit more. For those of you guys who have seen any movies where they've got the conspiracy theorist that has the like pin board that they have a bunch of articles and photos, and then they've got a pin in one spot with a string going to the next. That's the easiest way for me to try and describe what we're about to do. So when you click on the polygon tool, you click in one spot, think of that as adding a pin. So there's this little pin right here, and I'm not dragging. It's important to note, I'm not clicking and dragging. I just clicked in one spot, and as I'm moving away from that spot, it shows this kind of faint blue line following my cursor wherever I go. Now that faint blue line will solidify as soon as I click the next time. Now, as I'm moving away, again, that new pin has been dropped, the line has been turned into this nice solid blue line, and the one that I'm moving away from that dot with is faint. Click again, and again, and again. And then finally, once I'm done with my shape, click on the first dot. This solidifies my shape, and now I can actually make changes to it with those same dots that we saw that makes the adjustments to the rectangular size. Delete that shape. But then I also have the option to actually add corners to the polygon. So with the rectangle, I was just changing one of the lines. With the polygon, when I click and drag on one of those dots that's faint, it actually adds a new pin for me. So I can click and drag there and kind of adjust my shape back to where I want it to be. So if I wanted to make sure that I was getting these little sections here, I can do so. As we've been adding any of these shapes, I wanted to point out that this actually is something that we can move around if we wanted to. And also what it's doing is actually adding on the actual search criteria, the shapes that I've drawn. You can get rid of them from here, or you can select the shape and hit delete shape from there. But this is going to be treated the same exact way that you would treat a zip code or a subdivision that you've put in. So instead of it allowing you to use one of those, it's going to be using whatever shape you've got. Or not the subdivision. It'll still allow you guys to use a subdivision search within this. It's just not going to do city and zip code. Anyway, we'll delete that shape. So that's an option for our search function. The rest of these options, though, are more just for clarity on what you're looking at and where you are. So in this case, I'm going to click on the boundaries. The parcels option is the only default that you guys should see whenever you first get into Realist. There's also a zip code option. Actually, let me move to a little bit better spot. That should work. All right, so I'm going to add on the zip code. You notice this now adds a bunch of blue lines indicating where the zip codes are. And if I zoom out one step, it's actually going to label those for me so I can see what each of the zip codes is. We also have the option to see the city, county, school district, and even the flood zone information. Now, down at the very bottom of the screen, or bottom of this menu, excuse me, you guys can see that I'm at 6 out of 6 selected. So even before I've gotten to the point that I've moved on to any of these other tabs, I've already expended all 6 of the items that I can fill. So even if I go over to the next tab, I'm seeing 6 of 6 selected. I actually literally cannot check any of these checkboxes. It won't let me. But as you guys can see, this is not a good amount of information. This is way too much. If I'm scrolling around, it's going to take a little bit of extra time to have to fill in that area. Who knows what these school district lines are? It's just not even showing the labels on them anymore because they're underneath something or they're over something or whatever the case may be. It's just not ideal. So in this case, I usually recommend to people maybe add one item from this. So like just the flood zone or just the school district lines, whatever is going to end up giving you the information that you need, but not overburdening you with just too much data. But let's move on to the next tab. On this next one, we've got distressed properties that you can pin the sales and values. This is going to be showing all of the tax record information. So any dot on the map that we see here is actually going to be a property that's sold. And it's going to be kind of subtle right now. It kind of looks like my map is breaking out in hives, but if I zoom in here, you can see these a little bit clearer. It's just those little red dots everywhere. Now, we also have the option of adding on, so this is, again, the sales information from the tax records. I can also see the MLS status sales as well. Now, you may end up noticing that there are some spots that have overlap. So we'll see that this property sold in the last 3 months, and also there was a tax record. The tax record is kind of hidden behind the MLS dot now. But you may also notice that there are some spots that have an MLS sold, but it doesn't actually show that the tax record has caught that. Just as a reminder, the MLS is going to feed data over immediately. Like within 15 minutes of you hitting closed on one of your listings, it's going to show in Realist as closed. But it's not going to show that the tax record has closed it out until after we get a new recording date. Tulsa County in particular happens to be very quick about updating that stuff, but depending on where you live, where you work, you might not actually see those. So just keep that in mind. Anyway, we also have a couple extra options here for different MLS statuses. But if you guys are ever looking for foreclosures, you can actually fill this up. Notice each of those is their own thing, but this will be an easy way to, well, actually, let me move over where I know there's probably, yeah, this is sad, but also there's a lot more over here. Anyway, I'm going to clear all those off. And let's move on to the next one. So we've got a trends tab, which is going to allow us to see all of the different types of information. We've got a median sales price. Again, remember, this is going to be keeping track of the tax record information. We've got the real AVM, which is going to be showing us on a zip code by zip code basis what the information is. If I zoom out far enough, hopefully it'll actually allow me to see this. There we go. Control click on this. Oh, actually, this is supposed to be showing us a color on here, but it actually looks like it's not. I might need to report that. Yeah, it's not doing it. This is not showing the information it's supposed to show. Well, actually, you know what? Now that I'm zoomed out, let me actually show you guys this median sales price one again. This is actually just a funny little idiosyncrasy with how data is being processed. And again, another way for people to lie to you with numbers. If you guys ever notice on this map, when I start zooming out, you're going to end up seeing some things that look a little bit peculiar. So like over here in Oklahoma City, yeah, prices around in this area make sense. But then I get down to this spot right here, and there's apparently $400,000 to $500,000 value. Again, median sales price for this whole zip code is apparently at the top of this range here. Now, up at the top left of the screen, you guys see this use control click to see shape value. If you guys are on a Mac, it's command, but same basic idea. I'm going to control click on this, and I see that 430,000 was the median sales price for this area. It's a more egregious example all the way over here in this Mountain View area. If I do a control click on this, I see $1.5 million is the median sales price. Now, obviously, this is not valuable information. You guys might have already picked up on what the problem is. If I'm going to switch over to sales activity and check this same exact area and check this same exact area, I'm going to notice that, wow, look at that, only one thing sold. So my median was based on one item. Same thing goes over here in Mountain View. Select that. So one property sold for 1.5 million and one property in this area sold for 430,000. So just bear that in mind, that when you see one thing, that is not a full picture of what you guys are looking at. You guys need to combine some of that information together. So like here in this Yukon area, we got 738 properties that sold from 3 months before April. And if I switch this back over to median sales price, I can see that this must be a pretty nice area, 253,000. So $250,000 is the median price for that 700 plus properties that sold in that area. Just to give you guys a little bit more practical perspective, since I'm assuming most of you aren't in the Oklahoma City area, here's a nice spot just across the river. 450,000 is the median sales price. Switch this back over to our sales activity, and we'll know that this is not actually something that's been based on a handful of properties. This is actually 73 properties. So just shy of $500,000 in this area. Anyway, I'm going to switch this back over to none, and let's take a look at the other options. So there's a points of interest option here. This might be of value if you guys have somebody that's interested in knowing like where things are. I'm going to zoom us in to where I used to live. So are you? Here we go. So I used to live right in this apartment complex. It's not showing the outline of it, but right here. And for those of you guys who don't know, right across the street is a fire department, which is great. Strongly recommended. If you guys ever want to have really terrible sleep, live across the street from a fire department or a police station, which, speaking of which, is an option on here. Now, in this case, I'm going to zoom us over to the Riverside area. So right along Riverside here, is a police station. So if they ever needed to see that, they could actually see where the nearest police station is or where the nearest education. So that's going to add schools, food and dining, so they can see where there's restaurants, which, as you guys probably know, plenty of stuff here on 71st. It's just going to start filling up the map. This does not come out of your 6 total. So you can literally just fill the map up with all of the businesses, all of the amenities, all of the government services that you might want. But it's going to fill up the map a little bit too densely. You might want to start zooming in, and that'll start showing a little bit more accurate information. But whether or not this is valuable or not, it's really up to your client. I usually don't recommend adding any of that stuff. I figure that's what people can use Google Maps or whatever similar service to look that stuff up. There is also a driving directions option. If you guys have been through one of my classes in the past, I found out recently that I had given some bad information out. The drive from and drive to option, I was under the impression that you could actually put in a parcel number for that particular county and it would map it to that location. Unfortunately, either they broke that, because I have 100% positive checked it in the past, or it's just no longer available. So just keep in mind, if you guys are trying to get driving directions from one place to another, you're going to have a property that has a 911 address. If you guys happen to be looking at a property that's vacant land out in the middle of nowhere and you want to get directions, you guys can always put in your address, choose where you're going to be going, and base that on a property that's nearby rather than the actual property itself. Then you can always just find your way down the street or whatever, but that's about it. There's an email option. You can also clear that off the map if need be. There's also a just simple locate on map option. So that property that I was talking about earlier on Riverside, it'll just zoom me into that. So instead of it doing an actual search, I can just find where the dot is. Now this could be useful if you guys are just not trying to search for that property, but maybe you know that property and it was the, person up the street that was actually talking to you, that kind of situation. There's also going to be some, let me clear that all off the map. Add this back on there, parcel. Clear that out. All right, so now I'm back to just a blank screen. Let's say that I wanted to zoom in on this particular part and actually get the owners of this property some information about the flood zones. This is actually one of my favorite spots to talk about because if you guys remember back in 2019, we had a pretty substantial flood. For those of you guys who aren't aware of that, it was a at least when it was originally being reported, a once every like 500 year, or once every 300 years, I think is what they had initially said, once every 500 years, whatever. Anyway, this particular property is actually owned by some people I know, and they have or they were planning on at least selling their house. Well, lo and behold, when they had initially gone through and were trying to sell it, the location of where the right format. Okay, sorry, just trying to make sure that my line was going to show up properly. The location of where the FEMA flood zone was actually cut in front of their house, right there, and then continued on or whatever. So their house was actually right up here. It's just this little square there. But what that was actually showing was that they weren't in a flood zone with their property. Meanwhile, when the flood actually happened, this is exactly where the flood stopped, was where that 500-year flood zone ended. So subsequently, FEMA ended up adjusting where their lines were, and they decided not to sell because of it. But this is something that the city of Tulsa ended up deciding that they wanted to investigate a little further. So if you guys want some more information about this, you can always go over into Matrix, do that public record search, add that to your search function here, Riverside, find it on the map. And you guys can see in the Matrix side of things, Realist has not yet added this, but on the Matrix side of things, there's a layer, it's layers instead of boundaries, for the Tulsa flood zones. And this way you guys can actually see the flood zones according to Tulsa. So where they're actually saying that this is a regulatory flood zone and where it's not. So it's significantly less complicated than the FEMA side of things, but there are some areas that they made some minor adjustments to, just because they're the people on the ground. They're not looking at, topographical maps and stuff like that. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Let's jump back in here. Let's say that I wanted to deliver some of the information to my client. I can actually add any of those layers that I want to the map. And then I can also add in any rulers, which is going to allow me to do measurements. So I can say I want to measure from the front door to the road. Go. Click again. That solidifies the line. And when I click on this line, it's going to indicate to me, 64.12 feet, apparently. So I can measure that kind of stuff. We also have the option to add on any pins. So I could add that on there and say, set our building. There we go. Add that on there. And then I can actually print this information out or email it. Now, I haven't talked about any of these options at the bottom of the map. Just to keep this brief, we've got a print option that allows me to just print the map. If I had search results, I can print it with a table. If I had search results, I can also do this map and table where it shows the map and the table, the same way that we saw when we were in the split view. If there was multiple properties that I had found, I can also create a reports page or a cards page. The email option effectively does the exact same thing with the addition of this mailing option. But I'm going to clear all of this information off, get all of that off the map, add my parcels back on. Let's do one more option. I'm going to go over here. Let's do a subdivision, and I'm going to say Turtle Creek. Turtle Creek, apply, run my search. And this provided me all of the listings in Turtle Creek in Broken Arrow. Now, one small problem with this, I want to get all of this information to a mail merge. There's a couple different ways for us to do this. There's a simple export option. The quick export will take whatever you guys have on your table. So you guys can see the way that this is laid out, year built, owner occupied, owner name, so on and so forth. We can make changes to this by clicking and dragging on some of this stuff or customizing the table over here. But that's just going to take whatever you guys have and turn that into an Excel file in that order. If we end up switching this over to export, customize export, we get to choose which fields are going to be exported. Just bear in mind that any exporting you do, either through this system, got a little allocation there, or through this labels system, which makes the whole labeling situation way easier, has a 7,500 export limit. So if you guys ever end up in that situation, just double check that you guys haven't hit that cap. If you ever do, just reach out to us. We can increase it and you'll be good to go. But we've got some options on our website explaining the export functions. Whenever I send off the recording this afternoon, I'll include some of those extra options on there so you guys can see what that looks like, how it functions, everything. But that's it for our class today. If you guys do end up having any other questions or comments, go ahead and post those now. I'll leave the session open for a couple minutes, but if I could get everybody to raise their hand one last time, you can effectively treat this as a goodbye. Awesome. James, Desiree, Sherry, Carrie, Stephen, appreciate it. You guys are all clear to go. Again, thank you guys so much for joining us today. But if you guys hit that raise hand button one more time, I can see you guys on your way out. And hopefully see you guys in future classes. Neil and Lisa, if you guys wouldn't mind hitting that raise hand option. Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate it. Yes. Oh, and actually, that's actually what I was just about to put on the screen. Yeah, just give us a call. The option to get through to the MLS side of things instead of just our generic GTAR side is option number 2. All right. Yeah, you guys are all good to go. Thank you guys so much. As long as you were here at the beginning of class and stuck through to the end, you guys should be set. But I think everybody hit the raise hand button. I think Stephen was out, but that's okay. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and close up shop. Again, thank you guys so much for joining us. Give us a call if you need to. Send us an email 24/7. We'll be there for you. Have a good one, guys. Stay safe. Stay out of that heat. And we'll see you in the next class.